And welcome to this edition of G220 Radio. My name is Mike, and I've switched roles with Ricky. But Ricky's with us this time. He's been gone for several weeks. So glad to have you back, Ricky.
It's good to be back, brother. It's good to be back.
I know you helped stream a couple weeks ago, although without being part of it. So he hasn't been away. Just you know, I guess you have been away.
Yeah, as I was saying to those who maybe tuned in for the um, live Facebook earlier, Facebook Live. See, it's been so long that I've been gone. I don't even know what these things are called anymore. But for those that had tuned in earlier, um, I've been sick, and there's been a lot of things going on over the last couple months. We were doing kitchen remodel, and then I started getting sick, and there was just continuous thing after continuous thing happening. And so, I've had to step away for a little while there, and tried to come on when I was feeling well. But hopefully, we'll be moving forward. I hope that these things are kind of, while I'm still dealing with some things, but hopefully they'll be moving forward, and we can continue to be here for you guys every Tuesday night on Facebook and on YouTube. So
Yeah,
give you two platforms there to choose from, and whatever easier or works better for you to listen to. So it's great.
yeah, it's good to have you back with us, and um, I guess we could start getting into our topic. Nathaniel can't be with us; he has some other things that he has to deal with um, for it. Um, Last week or a couple weeks ago, a article from Real Clear Religion, which is the source. It was reposted on another blog, talking about hymnals still have a place in the modern church. And I'll try to go back and link an article. So if you wanted to read it fully, we're not going to read it here. But just to bring this up, I don't know, Ricky, do you remember doing like having worship wars, um, dealing with that in a church or anything? You maybe heard about it.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen the back and forth that people have had over the years with contemporary music as opposed to traditional music, bringing in instrumentals and things like that. There was a lot of argumentation over that back in the day. I know you don't really see a lot of it much today, although I have written some things personally against certain musical groups that are out there that claim to be Christian, like Hillsong, Elevation, Bethel, Jesus Culture, Matt Maher, who's a Roman Catholic, things like that, where churches are singing them within the church. And I think we'll talk about it more here in the program tonight, but whether a church prefers to utilize what would be known as more contemporary music or a traditional hymn style music, I think can come down to some preferences. We'll talk about that. But I think when you incorporate those groups that I mentioned into the church, that's where a lot of discussion that I've seen kind of it led to. Before it was, can contemporary music come in and take the place of traditional and the hymns and whatnot? Then it kind of was accepted, but then you started having these heretical groups being brought into the churches through this, that are singing, and churches are just raising their hands and singing along every Sunday to these groups that are heretical. And so I think that plays a huge part in it. But that's more of the discussion that I see now. I don't see so much of a arguing over hymns or contemporary style music.
Yeah, I mean, you one could argue that when Phillips Cring and Dean were big, I mean, they're heretical,
Yeah, that's true.
and they're part of that with it. I never was in a church with it, but I did attend a service at the Metropolitan Tabernacle in London. Peter Masters is the pastor there, the longtime church of Spurgeon, and he was complaining about basically Hillsong London and their kind of pharisaical approach to this, being that they are regarding the doctrines of men in modern music in church with the kind of them and being Jesus and having a very high view of music and with a very limited view of what would be permissible kind of within the regulatory principle of worship, which for those who don't know what that is, regular principle of worship, or RPW, says that what the Bible says how we are to worship, that is how we are to worship. So it is the necessity, the preaching of the word, the right practices of ordinances, singing. Some of them would be psalm only, some are not. There's some division, some wiggle room there, and so prayer. I think that's all of them.
And even
Preaching.
even
Yeah.
with the regulative principle, as you said, there would be some people who may disagree and have a little room there. Even when it comes to music in the church being hymnals or psalms only, there's also the debate between some who even to this day still practice like uh, the no musical instruments whatsoever,
Yeah.
while others would say, well, we're okay with the piano and maybe an organ or a keyboard or something along those lines.
Yeah. And then you have the normative principle, which was what's not commanded, what's how I'll try to get the phrasing right. That
Not
it
stated as wrong.
Yeah, whatever is not stated is permitted. So this would allow, well, it doesn't say you can't have interpretive dances in a church service. So therefore we can do it. So you kind of see those are the two spectrums in which you fall on this. Um, we probably both fall more on the regulatory principle side of it. At least I know I do. 1689, Ricky over there would probably be similar. But there's also how does this can be done? I think that's where this discussion takes place. Is singing is part. How are we to now partake of that? Is there some room with it? And kind of this, should we use PowerPoints in our church services, or should we use hymnals with it? And I think churches can be different. I talked to my pastor. He read the article about it too, on how we do it. So in our main service, our Sunday morning service, we use PowerPoint. Though if we have hymnals in the pews, and if we're singing a song from the hymnal, which we do, we always include the page number so people can have the option to open up the hymnal and read the hymnal if they want to, if they don't know the tune. And if someone was proactive and noticed there isn't one, they could probably get sheet music for it. My pastor would not, hold it. But we use hymnals and sheet music at our other two services. So we have a Sunday night, we have a Wednesday night prayer meeting, and those are the times that we use hymnals. We don't have PowerPoint, we don't use it. So we kind of have both with it. When we got the projectors for PowerPoint, there was a couple pushback, but a lot of it, and what we'll probably talk about today, is because there were songs in I have the hymnal here. I have as you hear, a stack of them. This one is what we use in our church. I bought it so I'd have a same copy. It's the Baptist hymnal, published by B&H, which is the publishing arm of Southern Baptist Convention. And this is what we use, and we still use it. But if you want to sing a song like His Mercy is More, which is relatively new and a great song by Matt Boswell and Matt Papa, you're not going to find it in this hymnal. And so that's why we got the PowerPoint. That's why we use projectors in PowerPoint. And so that people know these songs, we take those opportunities on Sunday night and Wednesday mornings to teach new songs, so that when we show them on Sunday morning, at least half the congregation already knows the song. and so there's already those who are familiar, and the rest can hear. There is a difference between when new songs are introduced, um, but within a couple weeks and a couple singings, most people have it down. So that's kind of how my church feels, and you probably go in line. The article we have makes some really good points, but I also think he maybe pushes too much on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah, our church does. We have a projection screen up on the wall that we sing to, but we also have the hymnals in the pews as well. So likewise, those who prefer to have the hymnal for whatever reason, and some of that we'll probably talk about in the show, but some will have the hymnal and they open it up and they utilize it, and then others sing with the projection screen up front. Um, when we have new songs that are introduced, usually the pastor will have uh, our piano player kind of go through the tune one time so that we're kind of be able to kind of see where it's going, how it flows. And then, our pastor is usually the one that leads us in singing. So he sings along and then we're singing with them. And that's kind of how we introduce new songs. But I can see how that could be something that is brought up in the article too, as well as when you're trying to introduce a new song, how it could be difficult. But that's even difficult with the ones that aren't. You know what I mean? I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I'm just saying I was in a
Yeah.
church before where they only played a certain amount of songs. It seemed like every week it was the same songs, and they'd rotate it the next week, but right back to those other songs, and it was just the same selection. And part of it was because they said, well, our band, or they didn't say band, but our worship team didn't know how to play the other stuff. So while they were learning things, it was trying to, where with a piano, you don't really have, if you have someone that can play the piano and read the notes, you don't have to worry about someone learning the tunes to play them on the guitar and the drums and whatnot and all that
Yeah.
stuff. You just play it and you kind of follow along with it.
So, and I think, as we get into this, that kind of how I've, already kind of stated my case. I think he has a good point. With it, there are importances that hymnals bring, but there's also things like he mentioned that hymnals, became popular in the 1830s. Well, what happened before the 1830s when they
Right.
sang songs? So while we should recognize we have a great blessing in hymnals, that hymnals have not always been around. Unless you're a psalmist, and then you'll just say, well, the Psalms have always been around. So,
Well,
in
isn't
the
that
Christian
part of
faith.
the debate that happened during the big worship wars? Is the people that wanted to stay traditional and say we got to stick with these hymns, the new people, or the ones trying to push the contemporary music, said, well, hymns weren't always new. They came around the last couple
Yeah.
hundred years, so therefore, at some point they were new to the people that they were receiving at that time. But we know Martin Luther loved music. I
Yep.
mean, he wrote some great
And
hymns.
and there's evidence to say that he did use bar tunes to
Mm-hmm.
write some of his music. And as weird as that may sound, you have that. There's a symphony called Finlandia, and there's a part of the tune which is very common for multiple hymns that you can sing with. So, hymns come through different ways and writings for it. And so I think that's why this is kind of important to maybe stop and to think and consider some of his points with it, because I think he makes some valid points. There's some really good things to think about when we're considering, or maybe your church is going through this transition or hasn't, and to think about, okay, how can we think about this? How can we rightly apply scripture? We're called to sing songs, hymns, and spiritual songs to each other. How does that now look in a 21st century church where it may look different in an American church in the city versus an American country church, or a church in England, or a church in Africa, or an underground church in China. So really, we need to place this debate that this is an American evangelical or an American Christendom debate. You know, people in China are not arguing on whether they should use PowerPoint or hymns
Right.
to sing. And so, just to kind of start out by saying we have a privilege given by God that we can have hymnals or even stacks of hymnals of that we can choose from and that we can use and we can sing from, to give praises to God. And that kind of, to hopefully kind of set this tone, the benefits and that we have when we talk about this is really more of a Western American Christianity debate. So, you got anything about that?
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, I agree. A lot of times, what happens here in the American church is predominantly an issue here that's not so much an issue elsewhere. We have so much access to information and things, where there's many underground churches and church Christians who are underground, fighting for their lives, through persecution and things, and still proclaiming the truth and standing true to the faith, that don't have the type of things that we have. And so this is, you ever hear people say, well, that's first world problems. It's kind of like that sometimes in the church. A lot of things that come up that we deal with here in the American church are not problems that others around the world have, but yet it still is an issue that needs to be addressed, because it can cause division within the church, or it can cause, obviously with that division can cause splits and hurt feelings and whatnot. And so, but then there's also truth that needs to be spoken of at times, because as we mentioned, some of those groups earlier, the Hillsong and Elevation and things like that, they're heretical. And so those things coming into the church, whether it's considered contemporary or if they were writing hymns, it needs to be addressed.
Yeah. And I think there's,
obviously with,
to go through it. So I know you mentioned earlier that you did a Facebook Live, kind of just seeing what other people thought. And those who are currently listening to us live on YouTube or on Facebook, write in the comment. What do you prefer? What, as we're making arguments, say what you think and don't think, if you agree or disagree. Because I think there's pros and cons on both. And as we go through and kind of talk about some of his points, we can see kind of where he's coming for. But before, I have some hymnals to show. Rick, you got your stack?
Yeah, I got 4 of them here. That's all I have is 4. Elisa said we had a couple more that she's got somewhere, but I only could find 4 on her desk. And some of these I got from the thrift store. So, I've got here the hymns for the family of God, and it doesn't really say where it came out of in here, but it's printed by or published by Brentwood Benson. Publishing date 1976. That's the latest one that I have, because I was looking at the dates. I thought that was kind of cool. And I've got this Hymns for the Living Church that I picked up at the thrift store as well.
Not the Dead Church.
No. Copyright 1974. Again, like I said, I was looking at these copyrights because I just thought it was cool. I wanted to see how old this was, because this one I have looks very old, but it's not the oldest one I have. It's the Baptist Standard Hymnal. It looks old. Look at the
It's
words.
been well used.
Yeah, it's well used. It even has a church bulletin in it. Then I got this from the thrift store. And so it was at Rodman St. Baptist Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I picked this up at the thrift store in Cleveland. So it's made its way all the way here. But this one was published in 1973. And then this one is the oldest one that I have. And this one I picked up when I used to be a member of Fellowship Baptist Church. I got one of these hymnals from the church there because this is what we sung all the time. And we use this. We've used this to sing in our home. Me and my wife looked through this, picking out hymns for when we did the Flood the Sidewalks and things that we wanted to, sing there. And this is an old one from, I believe it said 1963 or no, 1968. So 1968. So this was an old one. This was my independent fundamental Baptist days, but a lot of great hymns in here. And so this is my favorite. And this is also my wife's favorite because she had one of these growing up in an independent fundamentalist Baptist church as well. And so she told me tonight when she was talking about it, she said that's her favorite one.
So I have around 10 to 15 hymnals. I did not bring them all in, although I think I do have my oldest one. But I showed you the first one, Baptist hymnal, I think it's 94, Southern Baptist. That's how we do it. This is probably my oldest one. Songs and Service Book for the Ship and Field. It's Army Navy, and I believe it's 1942.
Wow.
Is the copy date on this one. It was given to me. I do, as Nathaniel already said, I do play the cello, so there is some musical inclination. A guy selling book for $1. I got a book of Psalms and Hymns by Isaac Watts.
Nice. Did it have Banner of Truth on it?
Soli Deo Gloria.
Oh.
So I grew up in the Presbyterian Church, so here's the PCUSA, their old hymnal. It was actually a neighbor who lived across the street. It was dedicated or given. It was given by her to the church. My parents picked it up, gave it to me with it. So this is more of a sentimental. I also have a Lutheran and a Methodist hymnal on my bookshelf. I went out after they showed it. I do have the Hymns of Grace from MacArthur's Church. And if you're looking for a good hymnal, kind of more of a newer statue, this is a very good hymnal. It has some of the Getty songs in it. Has some other good songs that are more new in it, which will become important later. I think they're running about $20. You might be able to find them on sales. Probably not going to find it in a thrift store though. Not yet.
Yeah, probably not yet.
And probably my prize and joy, if I could say it, is I have Psalms and Hymns of Reformed Worship. This is the hymnal that is used in the Metropolitan Tabernacle in London. I bought myself a copy. And why this is kind of important even for our discussion is all those other hymnals, they kind of have the tunes in like that. But here, as you can see, hopefully, I don't know.
Yeah, no lines.
No music.
Yeah.
It is only words with a meter index, so you know what meter to sing it to, which means if you have a common meter song, which is just how many notes in kind of a section, and common meter is the most common. Amazing Grace is common meter. It means you can take the tune of Amazing Grace to other common meter songs and sing those songs to that tune, which kind of frees up a little bit with it. But I think to note in our discussion that when you sing at the Metropolitan Tabernacle, you have no music. It's just the lyrics, which is essentially a PowerPoint in book form in our debate with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is that with it. And like I said, of others, I took a picture for Ricky. I wasn't going to bring them all. There was a lot there. But those are the ones I use the most, or, guys have some more, sentimental value and whatnot.
I think when I go next time I get out of the house and go to the thrift store, I'm going to look at their books again. That's usually where I go first when I get into that store. But they had some before, and I didn't pick them up, but I probably should have. They had some Methodist hymnals and Lutheran hymnals and others. and I never picked them up, but it would be interesting to have them, especially if they're cheap. I don't want to spend like 15, $20 for a hymnal that I may not use, but you never know what's in it. And there may be many, I'm sure there's many that are similar to the songs and the ones that we have.
Yeah. So we talked about kind of hymnals. Obviously, PowerPoints are kind of self-explanatory with it. As again, kind of what we're going to be doing is an article by Tom Raby, I think is how his name. It was posted in Real Clear Religion on February 20th, and he goes, hymnals still have a place in the modern churches. And he starts off by the article by just showing, by talking about the worship war. A couple decades ago, he makes a statement called, at at their most intense a couple of decades ago, the church was rent asunder by contentious debates about worship style, and that is no doubt a true statement with it. That so in a sense, he's opened up kind of the wombs again. And, if we haven't healed with it. He gives some statistics about the changes, how drum sets have gone up, pianos have gone down, organs have gone down, and really kind of talking about kind of contemporary Christian music. For the point of the article, I think this is what he's saying is he's thinking about the songs the worship songs you hear on Christian radio, where they repeat the same lyrics over again, or they're very shallow in their theology. I think that's what he has in mind when he's talking about it. Because, people were mentioning it on Ricky's Facebook Live video. Well, what about the Gettys? Sovereign Grace. I've mentioned already Matt Boswell, Matt Papa. You can add Matt Merker in that case too, of people who are writing theologically rich and deep songs in hymns forms. They're not just worship choruses. They're actual hymns. We need to. So some of the critiques I may have of him are based on this, that he is looking solely at kind of CCM, contemporary Christian music, over and against what may be called the new hymns era of church music, and what you're starting to see come out of really kind of a seemingly, I don't know, I'm not much in the history, but seemingly what the Gettys have been trying to do for a long time. Stuart Townsend might be another name you can throw into that mix when dealing with church music. And so his whole point is that we really should just get rid of PowerPoint and move back to hymnals. That is what he's trying to get people to do, what he thinks is best for the American church today. That we've lost some sort of formalism, we've lost some theology, and we've lost kind of church history in it. You got anything, Ricky?
Sorry, man. Didn't mean to leave you hanging. I'm still trying to adjust. It's been a while. Yeah, I think we're, as we see in this article, I think where I would agree that I think that there is value in the hymnals and keeping them in the churches, having them there that people can go and reference and look at. Even my wife and I was talking about this earlier, just having hymnals, because if you go back many years ago when they had these, people had their own hymnal and they would bring it to church rather than going to the church and having the hymnal. And when you have a hymnal, when you bring them into your home, it can do so much more for your family worship and family devotion, just in this conversation, thinking about it, convicting me that, wow, I should incorporate that more in our family devotion time, singing, grabbing the hymnal. I told my wife it'd be great to get a couple hymnals that are the same so we could pass them, between the children and all sing the same song from the same hymnal. But I don't think PowerPoint necessarily is a bad thing. I don't think it's, I think you can utilize it. It can be used and it can be a tool that can be used. But I don't think at the expense of losing the great hymns or the hymnals, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's where um maybe he falls short a little bit, is that it's not this like either or. Either you use PowerPoint with songs with really bad theology, or use hymnals because it has really good theology. Like that's not
Right.
the either or, because there are old hymns that have terrible theology. Um, I mean, for the most part, they're not forgiven. But Arius is singing hymns to promote his own heresy.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, understanding that music is a strong tool, heretics use them too. And that, so it's not, whether it's a hymnal or PowerPoint and bad theology and good theology, it's what's the theology in the song and what's a medium that I would say fits
Yeah.
the church you're going to. If you're, a small real church and you can't afford to put a projection system in, or you have a lot of volunteers and just be like a burden on them, I mean, hymnals is perfectly fine. You're not losing something for not using a PowerPoint, nor
Yeah.
are you, I would say you could be gaining anything if you do it too. That
Yeah.
it's a means that needs to be used properly with it. Now he does make reference to like using it for like bullet points and videos and stuff like that. I think there is a line to be drawn um, in which it becomes distracting, like in a sermon. My pastor chooses not to do points, and I think I appreciate it, that I'm not distracted by the slides during the sermon. It's one less distraction in a church that has kind of become a lot. We've gotten rid of our children's program. We only have nursery for the babies, and so my daughter sits with me, and that's a distraction enough. And having a PowerPoint with points and would even become more distracted. Mostly probably because I'd be running them, because that's what I do for my church. And
Mm-hmm.
now I have my own set of concerns in dealing with that.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you brought out there because I was in a church years and years ago. Won't mention the name, but years and years ago, where we was a very small church. We had probably 25 members, and maybe only 15 to 16 were like consistent, regular, like there on Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday night. And we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't even have a pastor at the time. And when the pastor came in, we got a pastor to come in. He wanted, I was the treasurer at the time, he wanted to put in a projector. And I thought, that's a waste of money. We don't even have the money really to support you fully. And you want to put a projector in, because in the minds, I think of, and I think he was well intentioned. I don't think he was just like, yeah, let's just do this. And, but I think in the minds of many, they think that by updating something like that, when people come in, there's going to be an attraction. It's not going to be this old looking church. But sometimes I think when you come in and you see that, and I don't know if you want to get into this now, or maybe I'll
We can
bring it
do
up
it.
and maybe we can, but me and my wife was talking about, he talks about it in the where he talks about formality and informality, right? Now, I don't want to say that being formal necessarily makes you right with God. You can dress up, you can have the hymnals, you can do all the right things, wear your tie tight, and it doesn't mean your heart is right with God. However, I do think there is a sense to formality. Like we do a liturgy at our church. It's the same, and it's geared. The whole service is towards Christ. I remember the first time we went there, we thought, me and my wife both said, that whole service just glorified Christ. From where we had came out of, and was like, there wasn't no fluffy songs or no storytelling. It was just all focused upon Christ, and it was so theologically in depth. It was just learning. But there can be that formality, that liturgy, the way that it's done, that gives you a sense of reverence, or keeps that reverence there. Although at the same time, not getting complacent and in it, you know what I mean? But that formality at times, I think, can be a good thing, because you look back, not that there wasn't sin in the 40s and 50s, because there was, but there still was a reverence to the man of God, or the reverence to the church. There was a reverence to it, where there's no longer that reverence there in church these days, it seems. And so with that formality, I think, not that it changes the heart of an individual, but I think it can increase or give more reverence to God. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's kind of, the formality gives it a weightiness and an approach that, look, we're not coming at this lightly. What we do here is important. And this goes on, I mean, that's what the great cathedrals were to be. When you to walk into the cathedral, you were to feel the greatness of God, the high ceilings, the smallness with it, the shape of it in a cross. All of it was to bring a reverence, a weighty, a gravitas, whatever you want to do, to what you are about to do. And I think he does have a good point, that kind of, in an aesthetic way, that projectors and screens kind of don't look as nice. You kind of lose some of that formality in the building, and and how a church does it. Now, for my church, we don't have screens. We have a white wall. We just post it right up there. So when the projectors are off, like, that's it. Like, it looks the same. There's no white screen around. But other churches, it kind of looks kind of weird. And you do maybe seemingly lose some of that focus. This is what we're here for. We've kind of thrown these up to make it easier, and you lose it. I think, and there's an important part, in adapting is that, could that be something that is distracting, some, which would be, going against PowerPoint, because hymnals don't make you put up screens if you have the book in front of you with it. And so there's a valid point on, if you're going to do that, how do you do it well? How do you make it fit within your church so it's not this kind of eyesore like other churches?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that was brought out even in the chat here on Facebook is that, when you're singing, whether it's hymns or not hymns on the screen, right, and you're looking forward, right, you're looking forward as a congregation, and you're reading that, there's a sound that may carry, and it may,
Yep.
Maybe like if you was listening to a choir. I've been in some places where the singing was just cold and dead, but I've been in some places where there was a large group of people, men especially, and men were singing, and it just, like, matter of fact, there was a conference here with our church, and we went to a what is that school? I think it was, it's not Baldwin Wallace. It's a school that's I think it's Baldwin Wallace, connected to a Methodist, but they just kind of separated from them because the Methodists took a stand on homosexuality. I don't remember what school that is off the top of my head. I'm having a brain freeze. But we went we rented their cathedral area to have this conference, and all these men were there, and they were singing, and there was a large pipes from the organ thing. It was old, it's old, historic, and wow, just the sound of these men singing, right? So there can be some benefits to that as well, where you're
Mhm.
looking forward. There wasn't projections there; it was hymnals, but I mean, there's still a. It was just that can be a benefit, I guess, or a plus, or one something that you could look at as being a benefit to
Yeah.
being able to look forward and sing together.
You know, one could say, as I've been in choirs, you're supposed to hold it up in a ways. So if you're looking down, you're not in a proper position to sing. Um, we can take that, as it is. But I mean, even when my church made the transition, it was louder because people tend to look down in the hymnals. They didn't tend to hold them up and to sing out um with it. So there is that um that does make it sound better. And even at Together for the Gospel, they have the projections and you can read the words off of it, but they also provide you the music and the bulletin, so you kind of have the best of both worlds at that point. But just the sheer loudness, 10,000 men singing. I mean, at times when I went, it was Bob Kaufman leading music, and you could hardly hear him through the sound system.
Mm-hmm.
And just the amaze with that. And I think again, it comes down to it. But at that point, it doesn't really matter whether it's a PowerPoint or hymnals.
Yeah.
That there is this um that good singing is always when you're standing up straight, looking forward, and kind of projecting in that way. I think PowerPoints helps people by default do it, where hymnals you have to be more cautious in holding up your hymnal to sing. But that
Yeah.
is there is that way. And I think he proves a point when you kind of look at this, is that when churches tend to put PowerPoint in place of hymnals, I think, and this is really important, we lose our connection to kind of the church Catholic, and especially with hymns that have been passed down for centuries, that we can sing like them.
Right.
Unless you have someone adding words to A Mighty Fortress or A God or Amazing Grace, where you have that connection. But just some of the songs like Immortal, Invisible, God Only Wise, and singing that as people have for a couple centuries now.
Yeah. And for clarification, for those who may be tuned in and don't realize, the bottom of the screen here, it says Reformed. So when we use the word Catholic, we're talking about the Universal Church, not Rome.
Small C Catholic.
Small c.
Catholic as in we're connected in all times with all places with true believers in Christ.
Amen. Amen. But yeah, I don't. One of the things that kind of was in there, uh, and brought out even earlier when I did the Facebook Live, and I just wanted to get people's thoughts, just to kind of see what they thought about this topic. But one of the things that was mentioned was the being up on the projection screen. It's good for those people to see better, and I don't think that's always the case, because like for me, lately, I don't know. I mean, my doctor wants to check my eyes out, but which is good because I need to. But it's been blurry and it's hard to see up there. And so for some people, it may not be as easy to see as having the hymnal right in front of you. But then at the other side of that, somebody made the comment that sometimes those hymnals are smaller words, letters, and so you can't really see that either. So either way, I think you're going to come up with the same problem
Mm-hmm.
depending on the person's eyesight and their need for glasses or a better prescription.
Yeah. I mean, I'm nearsighted. So if I forget my glasses at home, I'm not going to be able to read a PowerPoint from any distance. Maybe closer, I'll be able to kind of make it out, but it's going to be really fuzzy. I'm going to if I have the chance for hymnal, I'm going to do it. So yeah, I mean that, eyes are different. And, we use fairly big font on our presentation, so that unless you just have really bad eyesight, hopefully you'll be able to read the songs with that. And I think with it too, kind of in the same line, the same argument he makes, is that hymnals tend to have less errors than PowerPoints. And then so
Right.
people may get in a habit of what errors, he's turning it too slow, and some of those distractions. And and no doubt those are distractions. And as the one who runs the PowerPoint slides for my church, I understand those distractions. At many times, I'm the cause of those distractions. Um, and so a lot of it is having, you know, I know being more musical inclined, I have a good um intuition of when to change slides, kind of have a good rhythm. My church is kind of happy with that. Um, but just because you have a hymnal doesn't mean you have doesn't have distractions.
Yeah.
Was in Cincinnati, went to a church with some friends that used to be members of our church. They now live in the Cincinnati area, and my hymnal on the song "And Can It Be" had crossed out, "He emptied himself of all but love." They crossed it out and they wrote "because of." Um, and if you've listened to the show, you may have already heard. I mean, we talked about it several weeks ago about how that's wrong. That's a wrong theological statement from Charles Wesley. But that's distracting because I see it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, is that how they sing it? Like people writing in, hymnals do it. Or if you sing a song a certain way and you go to a new church and they sing the same songs, but maybe they hold notes that aren't, like, even in the hymnal, aren't to behold. Like the church has its own kind of version of it. Well, that's also distracting. And if I'm reading music and that's happening, I get distracted. And so to say that PowerPoints with errors, which are more common, slow slides, you know, only provide distraction, is say, well, no, hymnals can also provide distractions. And really, what these distractions are is me letting my mind wander for what I am doing and to forget about it and to focus on why I'm there.
Yeah. Also in the chat here, Larry had mentioned about singing. They use hymnals when they sing with their children's in their children's ministry at their church, and he finds out that many of these children don't know how to read music, and so that's probably another type of discussion we can have on the education and things today, but there's not this desire to know those types of things. It's not really important to know how to read music to children today. You know what I mean? Where I mean, you go back many years, um, there was a desire for music because the entertainment wasn't like as much entertainment as we have today. So you go back into the 1800s and 1600s, 1700s, there would have been, while there still may have been people that were illiterate, unable to read, there would have been people who were able to read that understood the music notes and how to read it. Um,
Yeah. And so, I know my wife and I we're teaching the Baptist Catechism. It's been set to music. The kids don't see any of the notes. I don't have any music for it. Then they see the lyrics, and they do just fine learning new music, in that way. And it might take them a couple times, but it takes everyone a couple times.
mhm.
Even the most accomplished musician doesn't read the first pass in music perfectly well. And so, and I think, and that's kind of where this article is. It was a lot of this, like, kind of true statements, but not really seeing the other side. And I think that's where, you know, understanding the importance of hymns with the connection to church history, um, that's important. But if you do it on a PowerPoint or if it's in a book, do what's best for your church. Do what helps your church. And, and with that to be better, to be kind of have a good understanding with it. Because I think, as some pointed on your thing, is modern new hymns are not in hymnals. And maybe they don't have the test of time, so maybe they shouldn't be with it. But there are good hymns that are being written now that aren't part of the CCM genre that should be sung in church.
Yeah.
And that they are as theologically rich as the old hymns were. And people who write them are theologically sound and want to write theologically sound music for the church.
Yeah. One of the things in the article there that he mentioned that I personally think is a problem within churches. I don't like this for the same reason I don't like, for the same reason I prefer family integrated. You know, when he talks about you know, during this time of the churches having these arguments and this war over it, some of these churches tried to compromise by doing a traditional service and a contemporary service. And then some tried to blend it together. And I think that when I see a church that does a traditional service and then does a contemporary service afterwards, later, for those who want to sleep in a little bit and not with the formality of things, what I think you do is you separate your church into two churches within one church, within one building, one congregation, but it's two congregations really, because you don't have the ability in that to draw from the experience of those older saints or those younger saints that are in Christ. And I think it causes harm to the body to do that. And now on the other side, he says, some people, they try to put them together and do like a compromising thing. And ultimately, I think it comes down to this. We all have preferences, right? We're Reformed. Yep. We hold to a regulative principle of worship. Even within that, we may have some disagreements on certain things, but we have a preference of what we prefer and think that worship should be and how it should look, right? And then others may have different preferences. If your preference, while I do believe it is important, if your preference is, and when I say this, I'm not saying that you leave a church specifically because they don't do something you prefer. I mean, if it's something you don't prefer, that's an issue that you have. If it's not like a theological issue or they're doing something because they're heretical, right? I don't prefer they do a combination of hymns and contemporary, or hymns sometimes and the projector, another time, the PowerPoint. Well, if you leave for that preference, then there's something probably wrong internally in your heart. Now, if they're singing Hillsong songs and things, and you're saying, hey, there's a problem here, not that you want to do these kind of music, but because of the ones that you're choosing and what that may be suggesting to the people who maybe don't discern, then that would be a more deeper issue. But to leave a church based upon a preference, you know what I mean? You got to have some really strong convictions, and those convictions should be biblical as far as why you would then leave a church. Because I'm not going to, as my wife said earlier, we were talking, she said, I'm not going to give up theology for a musical preference. So if there's a church that does a little bit of contemporary music with hymns, or does more contemporary music, but not, maybe they don't pick the greatest songs, but they pick theologically decent songs. But their theology is on spot, great, and it's solid. I'm not going to give that up because I prefer hymns over a projector. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And vice versa.
And I think that's, important Well, like in the worship war debate, I mean, one could say the reason why churches went to the traditional and non-traditional music is because you need the traditional service so that the people who give you the money to operate won't get mad and leave. And then you'd use the non-traditional to try to bring people into your church. And I think you're right. That creates you're basically two churches. This is why Mark Dever argues that a church should have one Sunday morning service. That is when you everyone as a church comes together. Because if you have two, you have two churches with two different, completely different people, even though they may share the same pastor and the same worship team or something like that. And
Mhm.
so I think there is that importance of, you know, kind of just to go at it. Now, how we added the church I was in part of buying the projectors for the PowerPoint, is that we just simply added PowerPoint to our already worship service. That was the only thing we changed was adding projection. So, and the piano player was, our piano player was worried that there was something more, and we're telling him like, no, that's all we're doing, and that's all we did, because we wanted to sing more on modern songs, not in our hymnals, and that was the way to do it, because we had an overhead projector, and those are even worse because it's like really big on top and like really small at the bottom, and no one can read the bottom anyways. Um, that was what we were upgrading from, for it, and so it's understanding that the question is how can what can be again as I said earlier, what does PowerPoint add? What can it take away from it? And that you can use PowerPoint in a way that isn't distracting, that does help your church and doesn't, as he said, kind of lose the hymnal aspect. Now, maybe we won't upgrade hymnals, but we're a small church. If you were to update to the newest and greatest, which is the hymns of grace, I mean, at $15 a hymnal, and you have to replace a hundred hymnals, it gets expensive. And so he even talks about how hymnals, or, production will basically take the money away from publishing companies. So publishing companies are not going to invest in hymnals because people aren't going to use them, and that's a valid critique. With it, but at the same time, we've kind of caught ourselves because hymnals haven't been updated, or they just been strictly denominational within a denominational context. So all PCUSA use the same hymnals. All Southern, or you can't, all Southern Baptists can't do it, but all your Methodists are going to have the same hymnals, and so hymnals have been more denominational than they have been kind of, we'll just have them, and then if the Baptists tend to be different with that, where you have a lot more kind of maybe independent fundamental Baptists with kind of their different publishing houses having different theirs. I have some hymnals from that kind of with that too. So there is a real threat with how PowerPoint economically affects publishing companies and hymnals. But then again, you know, maybe if there was more of a push with it. But I do think, using a PowerPoint doesn't mean you need a worship team either. And that it can be nicely incorporated into a church that provides added benefits with it.
Yeah. Well, brother, I think we've come down here to the end of the program
Again,
tonight, and so we
that's
want to thank you all for tuning in to G220 Radio tonight. It's good to be back with you. A good topic I think we had tonight on the program. Something to make us think, you know, We still would love to hear your feedback. Those of you who have joined us or those who would join later or listen via podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, whatever catcher you choose to listen on. We'd still love to hear your feedback. You can email us at g220radio@gmail.com. Again, that's g220radio@gmail.com. Go subscribe to us over there on Podbean. That's our hosting site for those where you can listen to the podcast. And hope you enjoyed the program. That's been G220 Radio for tonight. God bless.
Maybe one of the reasons so many people in the church aren't making disciples of all nations is because they're not really disciples in the first place. You think about Jesus and his disciples from the very beginning to the very end. Making disciples was in the DNA of this thing, right? To be a disciple involved making disciples. Follow me in Matthew 4, and I will, what? I'll make you fishers of men.
Never make a gospel appeal to people's emotions. Never. Never. That's why we don't have some kind of an emotional appeal here and play all kinds of schmaltzy music in the background.
And it amazes me that we believe this, that God would crush and kill his own son, but let you slide. Not for a minute.
At this moment, God commands all men to repent and believe that today is the day of salvation, that you are to flee from the wrath to come, to flee from the law of Moses that condemns you into the city of refuge, who is Jesus Christ our Lord. Run to him.